Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cybersecurity Recruiter podcast. Today, I'm joined by my good friend, Anne Minnium. Anne, how are you doing?
Good. How are you? Thanks for
Good.
having me.
Thanks for coming on. It's nice to have a fellow recruiter on. You're only the second fellow recruiter I've had on, so it's good. I think the listeners can get a lot of value from various things we're going to talk about, but I'll just do you a bit of an intro, not for you, Anne, because you know about yourself, but I'm going to do a little bit of an intro for the listeners. Has been in recruitment for circa 26 years. She's recruited for the likes of Gap, L'Oreal, Urban Outfitters, Kirkland's, plus more, and is currently the Director of Talent Acquisition for Clearwater. So I've probably compressed a lot of time, Anne, there into maybe a 10-second soundbite. So I've done you a bit of an intro, but perhaps you can tell me and the listeners what you've been up to over the years.
Okay. I've been in recruiting for a long time, so I'm dating myself. I fell into recruiting had graduated from college, moved to New York, and got a job at the creative recruiting department at Gap Inc. So back then, Gap was like in its total heyday. So Gap, Banana Republic, Old Navy, and really started very junior there and fell into it, honestly, and really was lucky to have a lot of mentors in that space. So I've spent a lot of my time in fashion and retail recruitment. So Gap, L'Oreal, so the beauty company, was there for a long time and really started their internal recruiting department. And then from there went to Urban Outfitters, so Urban Free People Anthropology, and then went to Kirkland's, which is, I don't know if a lot of your listeners would know, but
It's a law firm. It's a law firm, isn't it? Yeah.
And not mom and pop, a home goods store. And then obviously have sidestepped a little bit into this healthcare cybersecurity recruitment space, which actually has been really interesting for me and have learned a ton. But I'm really new to the space. And I think that the old adage, I think, is true, that you can teach an old dog new tricks. So it's been really fun learning about the space. But thanks so much for having me. And obviously, recruitment has been super important to me in my life. And I've learned so many great things and honestly have met so many amazing people over my very long 26 years.
Do you know what? And I listen to loads of recruitment podcasts and recruitment business owners, people that have been in the game for a year or 10 years, 20 years, but the amount of people that did just fall into it. But I find not a lot of people have got the resilience to stick with it. But
I'll say this, I think, too, and whoever's listening to this, candidates or fellow recruiters, I have to say for myself personally, and this is how I know that I'm still in the game and really love the game, is that when I get someone who either I talk to someone who's amazing or I land someone either junior or senior, I still get the thrill.
Yeah.
I think there's no other better word to say, but it's really the thrill of adding someone who I know is going to make an impact to our business and someone that actually, honestly, really, that is to me the minute that I think I if I lose that feeling, I think then I know that the game's sort of over for me.
No, there's not much better. If I can relate to it, there's not much better feelings of making a placement. Like it feels very good.
Absolutely.
So Anna, I suppose for myself as a recruiter and for you, a lot of cybersecurity professionals that are applying, the first person they get to in a lot of cases will either be me or you. So whether you're junior, mid-level, senior, what you view as an important profile, attributes that you're looking for within various different people, that counts for a lot in terms of people progressing or landing their dream role or their next role. So my question is, what are you looking for when you see people applying? What is it within people's profile that you're ideally looking for?
Yeah, I think one of the big things, especially in the cyberspace and maybe honestly in the time of where we are in history, but gone are the days where people stay at a company for 20 years. But also, I think for me, I'm looking for someone who's had some longevity in some space. So a job hopper, someone that's not been there a lot, changes a job every 6 months to a year, that's announced as a little bit of a red flag. However, if there's something in their background that I think is interesting, a skill set or something, I will still talk to somebody. And many times people have explanations about the reasons that their tenure is short. Definitely if someone and I just say, I'll say to a hiring manager or say to a colleague, the person seems very jumpy, I will still talk to them. And many times there is a reason, but the jumpiness can be a red flag.
Definitely. No, definitely. I'm the same. If let's say one of the things I look at is exactly what you describe, retention, and I think that's a recruitment word, jumpy, because that's the word I use. And it's if someone's jumpy, that's something to look for. I think as well. Just I know from stuff I'm looking at, I'm not just looking at skill set; it's cultural fit. And what are they doing before work and after work? Because if they're good this year, but they're not putting in the self-development time, they probably won't be that good next year because cybersecurity moves so fast. So I think kind of cultural fit, skill set, retention, but all these things matter. Is there anything else, Anne, that you're looking for?
I think too, it's just the way the resume is written. So I think that this is maybe it's common knowledge just for me, but maybe candidates don't know this. But in a resume, if you're at present day and you're presently at a role, the resume should read in present tense. If you're in a past role, those activities need to be in past tense. So a lot of times you will see that the tense is wrong, the formatting is wrong, God forbid a typo. So I just encourage people to have a second set of eyes, a third set of eyes to really look at the formatting of a resume. Again, I take that as just common knowledge, but I think it's really important that somebody's resume is clean, makes sense, is chronologically like the most recent is at the front, and then it goes chronologically order that way. I see this a lot more. I don't necessarily have a feeling one way, but some people put their picture, which is fine. I know that's very European kind of way, but really the tense matter. That to me, the tense matters and the format matters, and obviously the no typos or grammatical.
And you say it sounds obvious, but one of my clients I work on senior roles for them, but the junior stuff they do themselves because they can fill it themselves. And on a junior app, they put 2 or 3 really standard questions on there because this particular chap said it just weeds so many people out because so many people don't read the question properly, put spelling mistakes in there, put typos. So it sounds obvious, but people do need to hear it because it's just such a common mistake, and it just, like you say, you're just falling at the first hurdle.
And I have had people where I've interviewed them and I've liked them, but I do see like a typo or something, and I'll just say, I'm sure that you've reviewed this and you've probably reviewed it 10 times, but I just wanted to call this out. And they're always really embarrassed, but always very grateful. I would want someone to do the same for me. But for people who are listening, if I have a friend or a parent or sister or brother, sibling, somebody that hasn't reviewed it, or just you really need to give it a once over before you put it out there.
Yeah. Proofread it. Just proofread it. so if they're jumpy, obviously having the most recent job at the top, then working backwards, and also obviously proofreading. Anything else? You've given us a lot there. But any other?
I really think this is really leads to maybe a moral compass type of situation, but please only put what you're actually certified in, especially within cyber or tech testing roles. If you are like close to getting your certification or your CISP, but you don't have it, I wouldn't put it on there as a certification because you'll get found out pretty quickly. I think that especially in the technical world, it's easy to put those things, but once we talk to you, we're going to quickly find out. So it's just not a good feeling, honestly, or a good look.
Oh yeah, I mean, for obviously for everyone listening, like that, if you're putting a certification on your CV that you haven't got, that is a huge no. Yeah, couldn't agree more. And the other thing, I don't know about you, Anne, but one thing that kind of I don't like is when people put like OSCP in progress or CISP in progress. It's like you've either got it or you haven't. I think if you haven't got it, just forget it. I
Right.
just think it just muddies the waters, or it's almost a case that you've tried to get it but you haven't. I think you've either got it or you haven't, and if you have,
I
great. If not, just leave
I
it.
agree. I agree.
So
100%.
so
Absolutely.
cool.
Absolutely.
Anything else on in terms of do's and don'ts on ideal profiles, or you've given us loads? I'm just
I mean,
triple checking.
I do think that is my main sort of
Mm,
pillars of advice. And I think that you should also really only apply to something that you read the job description, that you know that you check off the majority, if not all, of the requirements, because it just over the years I've had people just apply to like every single
I know.
role
I know.
open, and then you just honestly just seem a little desperate.
Yeah, yeah. I know that's an issue because I know from again, I've got clients that will get a massive response to ads, but we do stuff with them because the response they're getting so huge that they almost can't they almost can't deal with it. I think ChatGPT might be a problem for this because I think ChatGPT can just let you apply for loads of stuff really quick. So I
Right.
think that can sometimes be an issue. But yeah, so definitely read the ad. If you're not qualified, don't apply. And yeah, I think it's just doing things properly and probably taking a bit of time and just thinking. Some of it seems obvious, but I know from what you're saying, I know firsthand a lot of this stuff happens. So yeah, no, it's definitely
And I
worth.
think, and you may be getting to this question, but I think my approach to recruitment and screening candidates is very casual. I appear very casual. I'm asking it's a very chatty conversation,
Mm,
but it's still an interview. So sometimes people show up to an interview, and nowadays Clearwater is completely remote, so I'm not seeing somebody in 3D necessarily. I'm
mm,
seeing somebody through a screen, but it still is an interview. Like I'm not asking anyone to wear a three-piece suit or anything like that, but I'm also not asking, I don't really want someone to come like in their workout clothes. So
yeah,
they,
yeah.
they need to take the interview seriously. And because it's casual, like our conversation is casual, does not mean that you shouldn't take it seriously.
Mm,
So the job description should be reviewed. One should have a little bit of intel on the company on Clearwater, and you should come prepared.
mm.
And Thomas, for me, like at the outset, I will say, look, I'm not a cybersecurity consultant. I'm not a technical tester. I will ask you questions a little bit around the position and the job based on the job description. You have to take it somewhat seriously.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And do you know what, Anne? It's even the most technical business owners I've had on that are like former ethical hackers themselves. The amount of times the conversation comes back to communication skills are everything, presenting the report correctly is everything, report writing skills are everything. Sometimes the last thing that I've heard. I've learned so much from these podcasts. Just I knew the importance of communication, but even from these really technical people, like they really value it. So it's yeah, for everyone listening, like what you're saying is really doesn't just resonate with recruiters or me and you because we're recruiters. It resonates with the most technical of founders that I've had on. So I think the importance of it is massive. Just flipping back to dress code for interviews these days, what do you think? What is the ideal? I know this might sound like a bit of a strange question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is the ideal dress code for an interview these days? Is it black t-shirt or shirt with top button undone, or
I mean,
what do
I'm
you think?
fine if someone wears like a knitted t-shirt, a woven shirt is fine. Look,
Mm,
obviously I'm not seeing your full body, so you could
mm.
wear like a woven shirt and your pajama pants.
Shorts.
It doesn't matter,
Yeah.
but on time, groomed, and eye contact. And I think, especially within Clearwater, regardless of whatever role you're in, you are going to have cross-functional business relationships with people across
Yeah.
the organization, as well as because we are customer facing.
Mm,
If you're a technical tester, you might have to talk to a customer. So the price of admission is being able to have a dialogue with another human being, and being able to have cross-functional business relationships internally, externally. Look, we're talking about work, so it's not always roses and unicorns. So there is conflict sometimes, and to be able to be cool under pressure, but get your point across is really important. And if you don't have kind of those ability to be able to get your point across and to build relationships, I think it's a really tough road.
Yeah, it's definitely going to stunt your career progression 100%. Even if you're technically really strong, you won't be as far along as you could have been long term or even short term. Yeah, no, definitely. And in terms of resume formatting, I know we've touched upon it slightly, but I hear so many different things, different views on it. 1 page, 2 page. What's your thought on length and kind of overall formatting?
Okay, so for someone who's been at it for 26 years, mine is 2 page, but I think that you really need to have the most important things on your resume. And I've seen resumes that are like 4 pages and just don't, if you're applying for something, it's no one's going to really take the time. You see the high points, but I think you should really put the most important things. And if it's 2 pages, okay, it's 2 pages. But I don't think it should be more than 2 pages. That's just
Right.
me. And I've been
Yeah,
at it for a long time. So I've got like 26 years. I try to be really focused on exactly what my job responsibilities have been over the years. And the sort of beginning of my career, I've tried to condense that a little bit and just highlight the most important parts. And P.S., my building blocks of my career started way back when I was like, 24 years old or what have you. But you can talk to that, right? When you get in your interview, it's not like it has to be like your life story. I don't think
yeah.
so. I think 2 pages max, max,
Yeah.
max, max.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking, should it be 1 page or 2 page? So definitely no longer than two. Definitely. Yeah, and like you say, if there is obviously if someone's dealing with an agency and they're getting a shortlist, I'm sure that every resume is getting reviewed. But if it's a job advert and there's hundreds of applicants, the reality is it's going to be skim read, or the first page only is going to be read anyway. So yeah, I think in general, shorter the better.
Here's another sort of just piece of advice that I have. If you are granted an interview, if it's in person, if it's video chat, Teams chat, and this might seem super old school, but I think a thank you, like an email thank you or follow up, is super important. And I think at Clearwater, especially, and every company is different, it's really nice to get a follow up email. Thank you for your time. Even if you're not selected, I think it shows proper form, honestly.
Yeah.
And for us, I think candidates are sometimes it's a litmus test. Is this person a cultural fit for us? Because we are so customer facing, and that we really need people who treat customers with a lot of care. And I think that does show, that kind of highlights a little bit of the soft skills.
No, definitely. And I think one of the issues has been, especially at the very senior end of the market, is it's got so candidate led, and sometimes people have let that get to their heads, but they really shouldn't do, because there's no benefit to being like that at all. I don't know what people think it is, whether short term it just makes them feel good for that moment in time. But the phrase that I hear across my client base is, Tom, no divas and rock stars. Don't send us them. I don't care if they've got 10, 15 years experience, every certification go in, they're amazing. Don't want to know them. So yeah, I think it's just like I say, just be nice. I think a lot of it has come from maybe a lot of recruiters telling them that they're very good and maybe get into their heads and this, that, and the other, but it shouldn't be that way.
And I am one of, I prep my candidates. If they're meeting management, I prep my candidates. Like, I will always say, I'm sure you're going to do this. Blank really likes follow up, a very thoughtful follow up. It could send something. And look, that's all I can do. So I can't make somebody do that. But what I'm really here to do as a recruiter is to be the advocate and also provide some guidance within the process. And so leading the witness a little bit, but again, giving that information, but not, I can't do it. But I think that's a really, again, just another pillar to really keep in mind, because I think it does make it a huge difference.
That leads on to the next question really nicely, because the next thing I was going to ask you about was interviews, common questions. What common questions should cybersecurity professionals be aware of, and how should an interview be prepared for?
I really think that you need to know about the company, and you really need to know about the job, and you need to be able to listen and to be able to answer the question succinctly, but really answer the question,
Yeah.
right? Answer the question and not go off on some tangent and then maybe come back around the barn again. But I think people like to talk about themselves for sure,
Yeah.
but they really need to listen to the question and answer the question succinctly. And then it's the recruiter's job to maybe ask an open-ended question, and then that would lead on to another question. But my sort of style is very conversational, so I'm not like peppering someone with a lot of questions, but it's just it flows. Sometimes it doesn't. I hope I make someone feel comfortable and they warm up, and then you can really get into the meat of things. But that's where I think you get really to the heart and soul of somebody, is when you are really, it becomes a conversation and they're lending themselves and being a little bit vulnerable. Look, I'm not saying it's a therapy session. That's not what I mean, but you're definitely making someone feel comfortable and having them really be able to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
And this is what is great when someone is talking about something and they're hitting on a topic, and like literally, because I see it all the time, their eyes like light up when they're talking about something that they're super passionate about.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm wanting, that person that gets really excited and is really motivated. But also, like we said, there's no room for a lot of ego. There's just not. And someone who's kind and wants to help others and is passionate about whatever it is that they're passionate about. That's when you get the trifecta of that person's going to be, is a good bet.
Yeah, definitely. And I think flipping back to the research and intel on the company, a massive part of the job for a pen tester or any cybersecurity professional is reconnaissance and being able to discover things. So if you can't take time in the age of the internet to find out loads of information, it's so easy to do these days. Like, you can do it so quickly. So yeah, it's just an absolute must. And I think as well, a lot of things that you're saying, Annie, is just say being real and being a human. Like, we were talking the other day about different responses we get on emails for client acquisition, and a lot of it is just be real and not cheesy. And I think in the end, like, there's so much like bombardment and stuff on the internet these days. If you're just personal and genuine with people, I think it just goes a hell of a long way these days. So
For
yeah.
sure.
Questions at the end of an interview, should I ask them? How many should I ask? If I should ask them, are they good, bad? What do you think?
I think you should always end my interviews if I'm happy to answer any questions. And I always say, I may not be able to answer them, but I will help get the answers that you need. If you don't have any questions, that's totally fine. I think it's good to have at least one or two questions, even if it's like, could you tell me a little bit about the culture that, but which I cover. I cover that sort of in the interview. But to just say, no, I don't. Okay, that's fine. But I would ask, I think one or two questions is great. Honestly, I think way too many like granular questions. Again, this goes back to hearing, to listening. Like, I'll say, look, I'm not the hiring manager. I'm really just want to get to know you and your background a little bit better. So asking me some super like granular question about pen testing, I'm not going to know the answer to that. And I have no ego about it. I'm fine to say, look, I don't know. I can find out for you. But again, that's okay. I told you that at the beginning. So that's another, you have to listen. I think but I do think two questions max is good.
Yeah, I think it almost feels like a bit of an abrupt end if you just go, no, I haven't got any. I think, like I say, I think having just one or two is nice. I think as well, one or two that kind of show that you've done your research. If you ask like an educated question to do with, in this case, Clearwater, I think it shows that you're conscientious and you've taken your time and you've prepped and stuff like that. So yeah, cool. What's the best interview you've ever done and why?
I think that I couldn't say this was like the best interview, but what I'll say is when I walk away from, and it could be somebody junior, it could be somebody really senior, but that I've learned something that the person has illustrated that they know what they're talking about, and that I'm sorry, and I know this is going to sound super pedestrian, but like that they're nice people, like they're nice, that they're thoughtful, that they have an interesting story. And you know what? It doesn't matter if it's fashion or if it's retail or if it's cybersecurity or compliance. Recruiting is recruiting, and it's people that you meet all kinds of interesting folks. But I think the sort of the connector is that everybody has a story. Everyone has wounds and things that have not gone well in their career, but that they're not bitter about it, that they've learned something about it, they've learned something about themselves, and that also that they're really want to pass on whatever knowledge they've learned forward. I think that's really, to me, I don't know, the pinnacle, right? Like you've learned all of this and you want to pass it on to, I don't know, the next generation or what have you. But I think when I have learned something about somebody, or they've taught me something about cyber or anything, I just come away with a better appreciation. I hope this doesn't sound cheesy, but like mankind, like or I feel connected. And you're not going to always feel connected, but that somebody is at least gracious enough to tell me about themselves, even if they don't get the job. I want to treat somebody with the utmost of respect and kindness, because at the end of the day, they're a human being.
Yeah. I think as well, from what I've seen over the years, like as human beings, I think a lot of the time, like sometimes we don't even act on logic; we just act on emotions. And if you're likable and someone likes you, like it just gets you like everywhere. I'm not saying that you can not know anything on the technical side, and just because you'll get the job. Obviously, there's a balance with everything. But if you're likable, it does go. It definitely goes a long way. It really does. My dad used to work on. Before he retired, he used to work on power stations, and they used to say to him, "You're not the best, but we really like you, so we always ask you back."
Right. Here's the other things, like when you get the job and you're in the job, and again, it's not always going to go your way, but if you have an emotional connection to whomever you've got a relationship with, right, and you're working on something or you're doing something, you're always more apt to give a little bit more latitude if the person is like kind and willing to go the extra mile for you. And so I just think that's also like when you land the job, it doesn't stop there, right? Like it's just about being authentic and being open and asking for more, or asking how you can help, or helping somebody. There's many times with, like in the Clearwater when I first started, I am in recruiting, but like I have this really small in the world of recruiting, you're lumped into sort of the HR, right, umbrella, right? And so I'm sorry, I don't have anything to do with benefits or your pay or whatever, but like I will help you find out what's going on. So that's, people appreciate that, right? And then if I have a cyber question, I'm calling on somebody who I have a relationship with, and they're going to take the time to help me understand that. Like they know that I don't come from that background, but I need help for someone to explain it to me, and they're going to take the time. And I'm thinking of someone in particular that is going to take the time to help me, right? Because I have a relationship with them, and that person has helped me immensely.
Yeah. Cool. No, definitely. And just touching on the point you said about a couple of minutes ago, and you mentioned about someone that's willing to pass on knowledge and help out. And I think that's vital. And for everyone listening, kind of one thing about when you pass information on is it reinforces it in your own head. So not only are you helping the next person, you're actually helping yourself by reinforcing it for yourself. And also just rule of the universe. You see what you put out comes back. The more you give, it comes back. And that's the whole thing, LinkedIn and stuff like that, all this community-led stuff. I believe the more you help people, the more in the long run it comes back. So I think that's a good point for people to pick up on as well. All right, then our next question. I think some of this we've already covered, but I'll ask you anyway. What do you see as the difference between kind of an okay candidate application and someone that's absolutely great? And I think we have covered this, but I'll just ask you anyway in case there's anything else.
Again, I think it's somebody, like their resume has to be clean. Going back to if you're just like reviewing someone who has applied, like they're applying for a job that they're suited for, right? Their resume is clear and clean, and you can understand like what what they've done, what their role is, that they have had some staying power at a position and have moved. I have a hard time seeing somebody who has been in the same role as a like coordinator for 10 years. Like that doesn't like resonate with me. So that they've had some progression, had some success. Those are really the main things. And then when you're actually landing an interview and you're having an interview, it's showing up prepared, that you can communicate, that you can have eye contact, that there's some levity, right? I know it's serious, but that you're somewhat comfortable because, again, I'm recruiting for roles that are customer facing, and you have to have a presence and be able to move the ball forward in engagements. And if you can't do that, it's just probably not going to be the right role for you. But also, I think it speaks to, as we've has been the center of this conversation, is about the ability to have really strong relationships internally, externally, and across the aisle. So it might not be in your work group, but you're going to have to. And I think that there are different companies are either really highly matrix or a little bit matrix, but they're all matrix, right? Like you're not in this silo. So it's the ability that you work with finance, but you might be in technical testing, but you're still going to have to work somehow like cross-functionally. It's super important. And I don't think we're not taught that in school.
No, we're not.
Who's going to teach you that? It's either innate, like you have it, or for sure I've seen people who have really worked on it because they know that it's a game changer and that's how they're going to move forward in their career. And it helps people want to champion them, right? Because they can see that they can make those connections across the aisle that I think are really important.
No, and it's true. And I obviously, from a recruitment standpoint, I work in the US market, but I live in the UK most of the time, and I can only comment on the UK education system. But it's true, you don't get taught that in school. And one thing I was going to say is, if I'm sat here now going, and all that sounds great, I want my communication skills to be great, but what if I'm a cybersecurity professional now, my communication skills aren't great, but I want them to be? What can I do to get them better?
I say this all the time because of the world that we live in. And look, I have my children are anywhere from 11 to 23. And I see that the phone you can really hide behind the phone and all of Twitter, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. But and I say this to my children all the time, you got to be able to have this is what I call cocktail conversations. That's how I grew up. Like you would go to a party and you would have to have the ability to not work the room. That's not what I'm saying, but at least have conversations with varying different people. And so if you can put yourself in situations where you have to talk to people that you don't know, it's practice. It really is. And so we have lost that because we're not in person. We're not like the whole date, not to make this a dating thing, but kids don't know how to ask people out on dates. So we are losing this human touch kind of ability to create authentic relationships or just have those in-person, in-depth sort of things. But I think you can talk about that with the whole I am thing, but your phone and Instagram and it's not really real. It's not really
true.
Authentic conversations. So I always say it's a skill. The cocktail conversation thing is a skill. And you just have to put yourself in those situations where you can be better at it. And it's practice, right? Like it's practice. There are those people who are can have the gift of gab, if you will, and can talk to anybody. But I think this is very few and far between. And to be able to do it in a way, that's not annoying, right? Like you have to be able to really have conversations with people and be able to strike up a conversation and exit a conversation. So it does take some skill and practice, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. And do you know what? I think as time goes on, it's even more so. If I think back years ago to when I was a kid, if I wanted to go and see one of my mates, I would have to walk around to his house, knock on his door. I'd probably get rejected because he'd probably be out, and then I'd probably go and knock on my next mate's door. Whereas these days, you look down at WhatsApp, oh, he or she's not online. I'll message them later. And I think it's getting more and more like that. So you probably, as time goes on, people probably need to make a conscious effort to almost be exercising those skills, whereas years ago, you would have naturally done it. It's interesting you say about because when I asked Caitlin, the other recruiter that I've had on from Bishop Fox, and she said a similar thing, like when you're in a restaurant, like just like talk to the waiter or the waitress more than you would, just anything to practice. And another thing I always say is get comfortable feeling uncomfortable, because when you're uncomfortable, that's when you moving forward and progressing. It's a bit like with this podcast, not so much now, but like first few episodes, I was so nervous. I do these LinkedIn live things and I still get really nervous on them because they are not recorded offline like this, but they're literally live. So I get really nervous, but afterwards you can feel that you've almost grown. So I think, it's making that conscious effort to really exercise those skills, because especially in a technical job, it's so easy not to. If you're staring at code all day or just looking at the screen all day, and especially these days, I don't know if you're the same as me, but I work on my own a lot. Like you have to, it's not like the old days, is it?
Yeah, no. And I think that what you said about being vulnerable and being open, and it's not, if you're not used to it, if that's not your natural sort of inclination is to be around people and communicate and be open, I think it's really hard. It's like any muscle though. The more practice that you do, the better you become at it. I think it's like public speaking or anything like that. Like for me, public speaking is not comfortable for anyone. It's much easier when you're like the subject matter expert, right? And you've had some experience and you're not going in cold. But I think the more practice that you have at it, it just becomes more comfortable and it just becomes better. But it is really, the communication part is so key, and that's never going to go away. I mean, that skill and the ability, and that's what companies really want. They want somebody who can speak. And we have someone at Clearwater who is like an unbelievable public speaker. And every time I see him, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to write that down. And you know what's so interesting is every time he finishes any kind of like talk or speech, people are talking about it like hours after. Oh my God. Like that was incredible. That little story like is repeated over and over and over again. Like it's pretty nuts. And I tell them all the time, geez, like that's incredible. That is just incredible. And it's not, honestly, like I have to say, it's not super dynamic, or it's not like a Tony Robbins kind of thing. It is really like repeatable, right? But you know that he has worked and practiced, and it's a skill that can be perfected.
No, definitely. And you know what as well, and don't want to say anything controversial here. Maybe it's a little bit, but I think if anyone I know whose communication skills are good, they've been practiced, they're technically strong. I think obviously there's been layoffs and stuff like that, but the best people I know, especially if they're active online, the communication skills are strong, the technical skills are strong. Like they haven't been laid off. Do you know what I mean? I think it not only does it help you progress quicker, but I think it also protects you. And obviously, like the economy goes in waves. Like whenever we're in a boom, we're heading towards a bust. Whenever we're in a bust, we're heading towards a boom. I think so. Not only can it help progression and moving forward quicker, I think it can protect you from any potential negative situations as well. Another thing I was going to say as well, I think it's true what you say. You mentioned about public speaking, and I think some people might be listening thinking, God, yeah, but I could never do that. Everyone's at different stages. If someone might be ready to start a podcast, be a public speaker, and do something else, great. But for someone else, it might just be maybe they want to write a post on LinkedIn, or let's say maybe they just want to chat to one of their friends a bit more. Or I think everyone probably needs to start at different stages, and everyone's different. But I think the importance is to do something. And you're right. Communication skills, I think they're getting more important as time goes on. And I don't think technology's replacing them. I almost think actually as technology becomes more and more prevalent, I almost think they're becoming more valuable because people almost want that personalization and that human touch more than ever.
Absolutely. And again, I don't think it's not going to go away. It's, as you say, it's only going to be more critical, and it's going to also make the gap between the person that does not possess those skills and the person that has those skills. The gap will only get wider for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's my thought. That's my feeling.
No, I agree. And like I say, for anyone listening, I think just don't resist it. Everyone's at different stages. If you're awful at it, don't worry. Everyone's going to start somewhere. Just little baby steps at first, maybe, and build up. But yeah, cool. We talked about that for ages. That was a long question.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I want the podcast, Anne, to help mid, seniors, juniors on the cybersecurity side of things, but also business owners, just anyone listening. I do think since the advent of remote working now, I think juniors need more help than ever. I know a lot of people that are at very senior levels when I'm talking to candidates on a daily basis. They say to me they're genuinely worried for a lot of juniors because so much stuff gets learned by osmosis, being next to each other and this, that and the other. Have you got any tips or advice or anything like that for cybersecurity juniors in particular?
I really think that you should reach out to a mentor. It doesn't have to be like a formal, but somebody that you know that has been successful at the company, that you know is thought of highly, not necessarily like again, not in a formal way, but if you can build that relationship and just ask for a little guidance, a little help. Can I work on a project with you? Can I do? So that's where you're really going to get those kind of, again, osmosis sort of things from somebody. And I think we don't necessarily have a formal kind of mentor mentee, but I definitely know of folks within our organization that are tapped more than others to help people out, just because other people just know that person is highly thought of and is very skilled, but also, again, not to sound too pedestrian, but is nice and is willing. And I think when you get to a point in your career, that's where a lot of people get their fulfillment is
Definitely.
paying it forward and just helping people. And I always say, find someone that's going to help you navigate through landmines, right? Honestly, like at Clearwater, we don't have, from my perspective, a ton of landmines, but at every company there are some. I've worked at places where there have been a lot and not like literally like they're buried, so you would never know that's a landmine. And I have been lucky in my career that somebody has said, like, just, you probably won't do this, but just know that if you do that, like, that's it. Sometimes back in the day, it'd be like you go into a conference room, and if you're new, you have no idea where you should sit. But if your inclination was to sit in that seat and nobody told you, like you, and I know it sounds crazy, but like you're dead in the water then. But luckily, you were going to sit there, don't sit there, because that's somebody's seat, and they would be like really ticked off. So it's, again, like sort of those nuances that seem very silly, but if I know someone's going to do something, I'll be like, just FYI, I don't think that you obviously do whatever you want, but I personally wouldn't do that, just because I don't want anyone to feel like I'm telling them what to do, but I'm just saying, I've been here for a bit. So just in my experience, that's probably not a good idea.
Yeah, and going back to what you said about later on in people's careers, people want that sense of purpose. It's the reason why billionaires still work really hard, because everyone needs that fulfillment. I see it in recruitment. I see different agency owners selling recruitment businesses, and you think, God, why are you starting another one next year? But it's because everyone needs that sense of fulfillment, that sense of purpose, that sense of achievement, of progression, moving forward. It's what we all need. So yeah, I think that's definitely people do want to help. I think another thing as well is remembering it's a two-way thing as well. I think it's easy for people to just take. I think as a junior, maybe you can help out, go above and beyond, maybe do something maybe after hours in exchange for mentorship. It's not just take all the time. And I get hit up a lot on LinkedIn with DMs from juniors just asking me questions. It's so easy just to quickly type that question they've asked me into Google and find the answer. And I think, God, like that just makes you look bad. So I think people using their initiative as well a lot can help. Especially, I say, in the age of the internet, it's just so easy to find these things out.
Yeah.
Books and podcasts, Anne. What's the podcast or book, or I don't know if you listen to audio stuff, that's had the biggest positive impact on your career so far?
Okay, this is a totally old book, but it just
Okay,
reminds
that's all right. Go on. They're the best.
and maybe a lot of people maybe have never heard of it, but it's called Good to Great, Jim Collins. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
way back.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's so smart and like totally makes sense. Okay, and then here this might be a little bit too like out there, but I'm a huge proponent of Joe Dispenza. So he is like about your sort of what you think about is what you put out there is what you're going to get back.
Yeah,
But it's
okay.
really where your thoughts are. So the more positive you can be, the more, and this might be a little too metaphysical for your audience, but I think it really does make sense of what your thoughts are really what is really going to be your reality because
Mm,
we are the creators of our reality. Things do not happen to us, they happen for us. And I think that is just it's something that I've learned and something that I have struggled with, I think. But I think that positivity and positive thinking and really putting things into action is where the secret sauce is. And
mm.
again, things don't happen to you, you make things happen.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Listen, I'm massively on the same page as this, and I'm going to give an example for technical listeners listening because I know some people buy into this easier than others. But it's true. Like I say, I mean, it's obviously all sorts of stuff happens to us. It's how we react as well. If you react positively, you'll get some good results. You'll get much better results than if you act negatively. But I've seen it with various technical people years and years ago because I've known them for a long time. And they weren't naturally good at something. They maybe failed a certification 3, 4, 5 times over, had to do it again and again. But they just worked harder. Their belief levels were there. They weren't taking no for an answer. They were persistent. And they're now very senior and very good. And everyone thinks that it comes naturally to them. And they think that they're quote unquote talented. I knew some of these guys and girls, and when they perhaps weren't that good. So I think a lot of it, that ties back into what you're saying on mindset. If your mindset's right, it goes a hell of a long way.
I
It
really
really
think
does.
it is. I wish that I knew that in my 20s.
Cool. Biggest mistakes. We might have covered some of this, but I'll ask you anyway. Anna. Biggest mistakes you think people make in interviews that can fast track them to a no? Anything that should be avoided? What would you say?
Being ill prepared and not giving eye contact and just it does take it's a two way sort of street. So being engaged and interested. Sometimes I'm like, does this person even want the job? It's so odd. But and really trying to I know interviews are you can be really nervous, but just really trying to take that nervous energy and try to harness it. And even if it's not your natural inclination, I'm not asking someone to be like a stand-up comedian or anything or entertain me, but at least be engaged in the
Mm.
conversation and have a dialogue versus just being robotic on.
Yeah, being bothered. Do you know what I think? That this is just me speaking out loud. I think that some of the problem could be obviously back in the day, you'd have to get dressed up accordingly, drive to the office. So a certain level of commitment was required to do an interview. Whereas these days, you can just do an interview wherever from home. So it's
Right.
just, you know what I mean? I notice it obviously when I'm working on behalf of a client, that person never gets to the client. But I notice it when I'm doing it for, I can probably get hold of people quicker and easier. But there's probably more vetting needed on my side because it's too easy to do an interview these days.
Yeah. And I think that what we had spoken about earlier was that it is a little bit like we're disconnected, right? So we're not in
Mm,
person. So
mm.
it brings on this sort of casual element. Of course, like anyone can approach an interview and however they want to, but sometimes it's taken that casual means that you can just like not be prepared, not be interested.
No, definitely. Cool. And I think that's about it. Is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have, or have we covered everything, do you think? Or
No, and it's been so fun,
yeah, it's been
really.
good.
And I
Been
hope
good.
I honestly hope it's been helpful to your audience and
No,
have really enjoyed. And wow, an hour went by fast, didn't
I
it?
know it did. It did. It did. Right. So, Anne, thanks for your time, and I'll see you soon. Really
Okay.
enjoyed this
All
episode.
right. Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Okay. Bye.